Switch it to the meet screen now. So, good evening, everyone. It's glad to be back after a long time. I can see many of you joining us from MUNX, and this is again another initiative of ours. So, we'll be just waiting for a minute or two, and then we'll start with the session. Shashwat, if you can switch the video to full screen, that will be great. So, if you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. If an elephant has its foot on the tail of a mouse, and you say that you are neutral, the mouse will not appreciate your neutrality. So, we at Equinox World MU and Triple ID Lucknow have always worked with an objective to popularize the idea of model UN and promote discussions of issues of global and national importance, and most importantly, impart learning to the young brains. We have also made efforts to call out the evils and make efforts to remove them. So today we are here organizing a webinar discussing sexism in the model UN community and making the circuit a better place. This is something that I think if anyone of us has attended MUNs, we must have either faced this problem or have been we have witnessed it at least happening to one of our colleagues or someone. And what has happened is that constantly this problem has never been called out. And thus we can't guarantee change, but we just wish to initiate it. So I just love to introduce the speakers right now first. So we have Ms. Tanishi Sain as the moderator. She's a second year student at LSR, pursuing an honors degree in psychology. She also works as a content head at Girl Up Prize, a chapter of the UN Foundation Girl Up campaign that works towards advancing girls' skills, rights, and opportunities to become leaders, along with the overarching aim of empowering society and creating gendered spaces. She is an outreach head for the LSR Psychology Department and an associate at Enactus LSR. Next, we have with us Miss Kaveri Raval. I guess she's one of those few MNers who don't need an introduction. She's hardworking, confident, and amicable. She's pursuing law from Faculty of Law, University of Delhi. She's an economics graduate from ARSD College, and she has been actively involved in student politics and even served as state research coordinator at NSUI. She has been emanating since 2012 and has attended considerable number of conferences in the capacity of a delegate and executive board member and is as a part of the secretariat. Next, we have someone whose face will be familiar for many of you from MUNX, Miss Anya Beg, the girl who roams around with pixie dust in a bag, trying to make sure everything is just a little brighter around her. With big dreams and a big heart, Anya Beg, at just 20 years of age, co-founded Agas LSR, while she pursues history honors at Lady Shriram College for Women. She realizes that imparting skills and helping women to get access to resources is essential for women empowerment. She is currently working as campus coordinator with The Journey and has worked as a journalist with The Quint. She is known for her confidence and also the ability to make everyone feel comfortable around her. A leading female figure in the MEN circuit, she has been actively propagating gender equality in all spheres around her. Next, we have with us again someone who does not need an introduction, and he, I guess, took one of the most brilliant sessions we had. So, Mr. Vaibhav Das. His unending virtues, unflinching concentration, and unparalleled devotion to duty might be difficult to imbibe, imitate, and pursue, but not impossible to follow. Being instrumental in forging the Odisha circuit since its inception, Vaibhav Das has been a devoted social change maker. In past, he has collaborated with Stanford University MHRD, Oxford Policy Management, UNDP, Government of Odisha on policies pertaining to SDG 4 and 5. He has more often than not stood up for the rights of the LGBTQ community, most recently by leading the Hyderabad Q parade for the second consecutive year. He was also the founder of the MUN Equity Forum. I guess one of the best steps we were ever able to take to provide equity in the model union circuit. Next, we have with us Mr. Priyanshu Grover. He's a penultimate year student pursuing law at Symbiosis International University, Pune. He has been thoroughly enjoying his study of law and identify himself as a researcher and a budding academician. He's an intellectual who aims to impart his knowledge while always aiming to learn more. He has been an active member and head of his law school's debate and model union society. He is also the founder of the Aspirant Initiative India, which has taken steps to promote such activities to the young minds. And lastly, but not the least, we have with us Ms. Jyotika Kumar, a, an honor student in philosophy from Delhi University. Along with that, she's also a Teach for India Fellow from the years 2021 to 2023. Also, she's very famously known for the contributions she has made to the international test circuit. And we hope so. This is the panel, and thank you all for agreeing. I guess this was the best panel I could have had for such a topic, and I hope that we are able to uh, conclude with something positive only. So, over to you, Tanishi.
Okay, hello. So I would like to start off by thanking everyone at the Equinox World MUN team for giving us a platform to have this conversation. A conversation whose importance I don't think can be stressed enough and needs to be continually had, and I'm sure all the panelists here will agree. Uh, so we're here to talk about sexism in the model human community and how to work towards turning it into an inclusive, fair, and safe community for all the stakeholders involved. I would like to open the floor by asking our panelists how real and potent do you think the problem of sexism is in the model UN circuit today? And I would ask Anya Wig to start us off.
Hi, thank you for having me here and, of course, talking about something so important, something so prevalent. Uh, like Tanishi said, I think the first thing towards understanding sexism in the circuit is also asking that how deeply is it entrenched into the circuit. So, since I've been someone who's been doing MUN since, I don't know, 8 years now, I have gone from being labeled as someone who can do well in the MUN circuit because she's a girl or because she's good looking to actually not getting opportunities to do well in the MUN circuit and to now being a part of executive boards. I've been part of executive boards where you had 21 male members and one female member, which was me. And I'm not contesting the competency or their merit at any point of time. Please do understand that I'm not questioning uh, their competency or people who've been on the executive board. But what I am asking right now, and the question that I do have is I fail to believe that there are not enough women in the circuit or there are not competent women to be executive board members for that matter. I see a lot of girls do MUN and a lot of them do participate, a lot of them do well. Somehow they're never able to reach the other side of the table. And since I've been on the other side of the table, I can also tell you about a culture which does look down upon you a lot. It's from both sides, from your co-executive board members also. They constantly question your authority and your decisions simply because of the fact you're a woman. And I can tell you that because I have been someone who's been subjected to that a lot of times. To people who are on the other side of the table. So delegates, they would very easily listen to a male person. They will not question their authority. They will not question their decisions as much as they would do to me or to another female executive board member. So I think the biggest problem is MUN is supposed to be a sphere where you deliberate and discuss on issues of international importance and where I believe intellectuals are made or you garner so much knowledge. But at the end of the day, it does become a place where sexism is so deeply entrenched and rooted that a lot of people have just taken it as a new normal, as something that's not weird, as something that's not out of place. And I think the first step is towards actually accepting that this does exist, not putting it behind closed doors and not recognizing it is not going to help. So the fact that we see executive boards all the time being constituted of just male members, or we see so many delegates reaching the other side only because, I mean, the gender acts as a barrier. I think that's one of the factors that does tell us that, listen, this is a problem. It needs to change.
Um, would Kaveri like to go next?
Sure, thank you so much. I totally agree with whatever Anya said. I have not been doing MUNs for the past, I think, 4 5 years now. But when I was doing this problem, I would say was as prevalent as Anya is putting it. It is right now. I remember people used to say it as a thing of pride. You know, you're the only female executive board member in the entire MUN. But the only question which always used to come to my mind was why? Why is it that I am the only girl and why are other girls not getting a chance? Because I have delegated with those people who are still delegating. Why aren't they getting a chance to be on the executive board? Is it because they are females? Is it because they're not getting the equal opportunity? As to questioning the authority, I feel in this, I'm sorry for using the word here, but patriarchy is entrenched not just in the students who are MUNing, but in the school circuit. What I noticed was the teachers were not far behind when it came to, moral policing the girls or telling the girls that they're less than boys. Not particularly in my school, but at a few MUNs, whether it was not giving an award because of a particular dress that a girl was wearing, or it was that, having a male executive board member would give them more delegates who would come to, delegate under them. The women never really got an equal chance to actually express themselves at MUNs. And the worst part of the culture that I noticed was that it was readily accepted. Whether it was girls accepting that they would not get a chance if they did not please the male executive members, to put it very kindly, or was it the male executive board members actually going out of their way to make it clear that until and unless something was done in return, they will not get an award, which was very baffling to me, because I would say I was lucky enough to get on with the people who were chairing, who were senior in the circuit back in my school days only. So in a way, I was shielded from all of it, because they always treated me like their younger sister, which can be disturbing at times as well if you look at it. That why does somebody have to treat you like a sister to be able to give you respect, to be able to recommend your name, to be able to give you a chance to MUN? But thank my stars, or not thank my stars, I don't know what to say, but that was very prevalent. And even when, as Anya correctly pointed out, that as a girl your decisions would be questioned, and that was very true. If there were two other male members on the executive board, irrespective of the fact whether you were the chair or the vice chair, the other two male members sort of got a much more say in who should be getting the awards and how the committee should be run, whether there should be interference or no interference, to the extent that even awards at times were decided behind our backs. Your position didn't matter, your work in the committee didn't matter. It was just that they decided, and that was the end of it. So I guess that this conversation was long due. One point I would like to raise is that it's not that this hasn't happened. When the Me Too movement started in India, surprisingly, not surprisingly, MUN circuit was the most in question in our circles, because that was the reality of the MUN circuit. I am hoping that it has improved now for the past 4 5 years. But yeah, conversation on this was very much needed. So thank you for giving us this platform to discuss this.
Thank you. Would Jyotika like to take this up next?
Hi, am I audible? Great. Thank you for having me here. So, in my experience, I haven't really seen sexism be so blatant. Maybe it was just me, but I found sexism to be more in the little things, like being talked over constantly, or just being judged by your wardrobe choices, or have the whole conference be so gender specific, that if a woman was having an opinion, she was labeled to be too bossy, or just as a woman to substantiate your argument more, and you weren't going to be asked to do that if you were a man. Or just the sexism that you face being in your own sphere, in your own space, by your allies. Um, yeah, that's all that I have to say.
Thank you. I'd like to ask Priyanshu to go ahead.
All right, thank you. So agreeing with all of what the great speakers have said before me, there's certain things that I think are important that we talk about, and that's why this discussion. So the first thing is we've all clearly come to terms with is the first step of making a change about something is talking about it. So as this conversation is, Kaveri ji also said that was long due. It's good that it's happening today, and it's a start. It's a start. So change is coming, but the thing is that I was talking to someone about this, because if you think about it, coming from the other side, I mean, coming from as a male, I don't get a say here, okay, to say that women are suffering. I mean, the thing is that I was talking to my friends about it, so as to ascertain whether what the knowledge that I have is sufficient about this or not. So first thing that I mean, all of us have blatantly noticed, and not saying that matlab, we haven't, because we have. So if a girl gets an award, for example, in a committee and the chairperson is male, you say that she has got it because you know why. But and things like that are something that we need to address, right? Things that like that is something we need to talk about. We're doing that today. So I see that as a start. Secondly, I feel that model events, and for that matter any kind of event, any kind of debate for that matter, are not places to pick up girls or to pick up boys or whatever. There are events that you come to for debating because you like it. You don't come there and you have the potential, you chair or you sit in the executive board because you have the potential. You don't do that because of your gender. And I think we should be disassociating it here when we talk about it, that people are sitting here in executive board because of their gender. So now the thing here is that we are so used to being on the side of a delegate, of an executive board member, of an OC member, where we know that there's some prominent people that we call on invites, okay, that we forget that since we see them all around in all conferences that we see nowadays, the first name that comes to my mind to call up for a conference is that person, because I've been seeing them all around. That's where the problem also rises. Patriarchy is a real thing. Yes, it is. It's entrenched into the immune circuit. Yes, it's entrenched everywhere. So the thing is, especially for the reputed conference I'm talking about, and maybe universities in particular, I think it's a regression where we go. It's a regressive step where we go to by saying that we'll call people on invite basis, because we'll call people we know and we have contacts with and whatever. But let's see the other side also. You call great people on invites, fair, but you also call people, you never even think about there can be other people who if given a chance on a fair platform would do better than the people you're calling someday. Because again, it's an entrenched notion that the people who are chairing right now will be the people who will be chairing 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 15 years from now, right? The thing is, we need to set an example for our juniors, because I was taught right by my seniors who taught me that it's your merit that matters. And that's something that motivated me also to do something good, okay, to at least talk about things, and also and keep quiet when I think that I do not have a stake. So I think it's important that we talk about it today, and I look forward to the discussion. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, Priyanshu. I'd like to ask Sayashri to go ahead.
Hey, am I audible? Great. All right. First off, thank you for giving me this opportunity. And I would really love to bring out Kaveri, Ananya, Jyotika, Priyanshu, whoever spoke right now. I think these are great points. Adding on to whatever they've said, this entire conversation takes me back to my initial days of MUNing 5 years back, when I did my first MUN, second MUN, third MUN. The one aspect which I've seen is that my chairpersons were always male members. All right. The second thing being that there is this holier than thou attitude, and I'm untouchable. No one can touch me. I have done so many MUNs. People know me for a very long time. I have knowledge which you do not possess. I think this particular attitude in general is what intimidates a lot of MUNers. I'm not just talking about girls, I'm talking about everyone in general who are starting off doing Model United Nations, right? This specifically for school children, all right, school girls. I don't want to name anyone in particular. You get this feeling that, oh my God, we need to put them on a pedestal. These are people who are amazing, who are great. And this is where the entire problem starts off, right? The point where someone thinks that they are untouchable, that no one can complain about them, and that they can get away with anything, whatever they do in a conference, is where the problem lies. Another biggest issue, I completely agree with Priyanshu when he spoke about, we see that people have been, there is this particular person who has been called for numerous conferences, right? We're not really giving opportunity to other people for coming up and putting forward their knowledge or teaching what they have learned. I think that is one other biggest issue. I have also seen male members who have been actively involved. They go up to the stage in opening ceremonies and closing ceremonies, talk about giving equal rights to women, and then again, in the blink of the eye, change their color completely. These are the same people who are perpetrators of crime. All right. These are the same people who come up on platform and talk about forming redressal mechanisms for women in Model United Nations conferences. In fact, when I was working with WebEarth on an equity document, I have spoken to so many people, and this one particular person talks to me. His sentence was, Saishri, let me tell you, and he's a male member, obviously, right? He's like, let me tell you what problems women face in MUNs, all right? So now I have to listen from a male member doing MUNs, what problems women face in Model United Nations. See, I'm in no way saying that men should not contribute. Obviously, gender equality comes up when females and males and every gender, right, in general, come together and work towards a particular goal. But you need to give voice to people who are unheard. I completely agree with Ananya's point here. Scrutiny in MUNs, especially for female executive board members, when you have a vice chairperson who is a male, delegates also in general tend to listen to them more compared to you. You are judged more on your knowledge compared to your male counterpart. Also, when there are points of orders, when there are points of orders in contention, you have to make them sit and make them understand that, hey, this is where you went wrong. But again, if there's another male member out there, or someone who has been doing MUNs for a very long time, or is famous in quotes, they get away with it, all right? And there are many competitive female MUNers out there. The only problem here is that we're suppressing them. We are not letting them come up. This is the biggest problem. Thank you so much. I think Vaibhav is next, right? Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. I'll just move in quickly here because all of you have just given a lot of pertinent points. So I'll just try to wrap up, because my head is like in a very dynamic space. I think at the very outset, even before we talk about sexism, it's very important to understand what MUN spaces actually are. They are not some pristine, safe space away from the social realities which our privilege makes us believe. So I think our argument itself needs to be premised on the fact that, like, we cater or we embody certain level of privilege, and we extend that privilege to make a neutral or blind space which just disregards any social inequalities, be it your class, gender, or caste, or ethnicity. And that's something which plagues MUNs across the circuits throughout India. And that is something I have seen upfront across like 11, 12 years of MUNs which I have done. I think the conversation also needs to go beyond sexism. We need to also account for heterosexism, which happens. Because I have been a victim of that. I'm sure like all of your lived realities like are testimonies of truth itself. But femininity is so stigmatized in our society. It's equivalently stigmatized in model UN conferences. And I was going through all of your points, and there's some very pertinent point which Anya said when she was talking about the depth of sexism. And I'm not going to question merit or anyone's competency. I think we need to change that narrative. We need to question merits and competencies, because my merit or anyone's merit has a lot of social privilege, a lot of exposure embedded within it. What Priyanshu was saying, visibility reproduces visibility. Great people get called on, like this optics of like how Narendra Modi also won elections. Like some greatness attracts crowd and they go on building. Their merit is embedded on the invisibilization of great women, great queer folks who did not get chance because they didn't have that exposure, they didn't have that connection. That's why what Sai Shri was emphasizing on, this holier than thou spirit, what we usually come across, the MUN gods. We have given that position, we have created gods out of human beings, and that's where these sexist structures embed themselves. And I think what Kaveri, Anya, Priyanshu, Shaishri, and Jyotika, all of them said, revolves around this one single idea, which is we inherently believe logic and rationality to be a very masculine trait. If you are not a man, you cannot be logical. If you are not a man, you cannot be rational. If you are giving a judgment or a ruling on a point of order, it comes from a very emotional space, like you deconstruct gender as you like it. Right? So this is something which needs to be pointed out, and that's why people don't take you seriously, because authority is also masculine trait. So all these things need to be investigated very deeply. Like what Priyanshu very sidely touched, like how MENs are seen as dating sites. Fine, liking someone, loving someone is okay, but we need to also acknowledge there are so many power relations in MEN. Like you give students, budding students, learning people a space to go and debate. But remember, the sexual gestures which happen, physical gestures which happen, they are also laced with power. The control which a chairperson has over the bodies and minds of their delegate is so toxic that needs to be questioned. And what Saishri is saying, you need to question, you need to make them understand, because I think allegations, or even very nicely countering them that maybe you should consider your judgment, just questions, they take it to the masculinity, as in like you're questioning my masculine logic, like your knowledge is nothing, like you're questioning my knowledge. So logic, knowledge, your own gender identity is so intrinsic in intellectual spaces like MUN. It's something which we need to think about when we are talking about sexism or heterosexism. Thank you.
Can I just add a point to what Vaibhav said?
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you. I would totally agree with what he said about logic, rationality, authority being a very masculine trait. Why is it that girls, like, I'm hoping that it is changing, but why is it that girls are always associated with the humanitarian committees? Why is it that, at least I have always been told that, you would be good chairing an HRC. You're an HRC person. I was never really asked if I want to be an SC person or if I want to be a dissect person. Since I started chairing, it was always that Kaveri is going to be an HRC person because she's the only girl who is, chairing right now. So we're going to give her the HRC committee, HRC, because it's not related to emotions. It's not related to logic. It's not related to the legal sphere. So that is another thing which I feel needs change in the circuit. Why can't women expand their options, explore, do committees which are not related, which are not catering to the emotional connect, but rather catering to the, the military part of it or the legal part of it? Why is it that whenever you enter a Security Council, even as a delegate, you will find all males and, just one or two females? Why if you enter the Intelligence Committee and 99% chances are that you're going to be female? That switches with the and males and other
Hi, just wanted to add one thing to what Kaveri said. Tanishi, can I go ahead and do that? Yeah. So, I feel like another important thing that we need to discuss today is tokenistic representation of women on the executive board. And Kaveri is bang on right about having UNHCRs, and now these days we have UNCSWs, just for the fact that people want to portray that, oh, we are very inclusive in our approach, and we have women on the panel, and we're talking about women, we're talking about intersectionality within gender. But like, I think a lot of people over here have talked about. To talk about intersectionality of gender, you also need to have an intersectional panel in general, and not just have them as a stamp, put them on the pedestal just because you need to prove it to someone. And another thing that I think was very rightly said, that we've been this entire concept of femininity. We've been accustomed by society to believe that there is something that we can do and something we cannot do as women. And an ideal woman is, of course, not someone who questions authority, or not someone who has authority. It's the same in the circuit. We've been accustomed to be doing and have predilection towards this sort of agendas of this sort of committees. And I think I've also been someone who does that, who has been doing humanitarian committees. And now I keep questioning: is it because I actually like it, or is it because I've been told and I've been pushed into committees like this since I was in school?
Can I quickly add on to what Ananya just said? Ananya and Kaveri both very, very important points. You mind if I go ahead, Tanisha?
For sure. Yeah.
Okay, great. I absolutely agree with this particular point. I think when I started off MUNing as well, I was more inclined towards doing HRCs because that's where we saw a lot of females going in, right? And when I started doing committees like Crisis Committee and then UNSC, all right, DISEX, I enjoyed them. I love them. I love military-based committees. But here is the thing, right? When I started becoming an executive board member, when I applied for committees like these, I was never ever even called for an interview for these committees. All right. And this is a very important point. I have proved my competency in committees like DISEC and crisis committees and UNSCs. Why is it that I was never really taken as an executive board member for committees which are completely legal and military based? Okay, and we see again male counterparts who are not even being interviewed for such committees. All right. Another very important aspect I want to bring out here is that sometimes, especially I've seen this in the South, committee conferences in general are filled with male members. Even if there are women who want to become executive board members for UN Women, for example, they are blatantly outright not chosen. So you have a committee like CSW, you have a committee like UN Women, where participation of women is extremely important. And you see that they are not given an opportunity to talk about their problems itself. I think that is, again, a big issue. Here as well, we are seeing how male members are taking away the platform which women are supposed to get to raise their issues. That is, again, another very important issue we should be further discussing about. Thank you.
If anyone has anything to add, feel free to go ahead. Yeah, sure.
I think it's a very important point which Kaveri made about committees. I think we all have this general idea about soft committees and hard committees and where people are supposed to go, right? And this is very entrenched, and it's not just limited to topics. I have been on the organizing side of conferences also. And I know how, while planning conferences also, there is this implicit need to have a woman related topic, because that will attract crowd, that will attract you sponsorship, that will give you this, that will give you that. But you will never try to undo the power dynamics which you are going to debate in a topic within a committee. And that's a very important issue when we talk about tokenist representation with respect to having EBs on board and also having topics while deciding topics. So it takes me back to a very reformative suggestion which we have, like I have. It also stems from Saishi's concern, what she observes in South. I think for myself, I can say when it comes to South, I think I am the person like who has done the maximum CSWs in South. And at a point of time, I reached at a point of time where I realized, is it is it me that people are not getting opportunities to like work in the committee, or like it's just the structure? So I try to again go back to my UNHRCs just to find to my dismay that the moment even I leave the seat, like of course that has a questionable power dynamics to it. What we are critiquing today, that's like embodied there. But even the seat which I vacate is given to a cis het man, and you will find tokenist representations of girls as directors so that no one questions the composition of such bodies. So while we cannot at this age just be happy with representation, a representation which does not undo the power dynamics on a board. So a representation which doesn't question or undo the power dynamics is not a representation at all. What Anya said, it's tokenist representation. So I think that that is a step which we need to think about while pondering over, thinking about questions of sexism.
Yeah, go ahead, Kaveri.
Thanks. This is related to the tokenist representation as well as, placing certain EB members on a pedestal, treating them as holier than thou sort of a thing that has been happening. The only question which comes to my mind is, even after allegations in the Me Too movement, even after discussions about certain EB members, why is it that I still see them in the circuit? Why is it that nobody has questioned them? Why is it that when 10 women who I personally know spoke up against a man, he is still MUNing, irrespective of, I don't know, MUNs are supposed to be an extracurricular activity reserved for people, I would say, under 25 as a general age, which I'd say 25, 26, till the time you're still in the academic world. But why is it that a person who's, I don't know, 30 years of age, who has been alleged, who has been like, I don't know, alleged in the Me Too movement by 10 women, is still in the circuit? Why is it that another man, who we all openly know has, been giving awards? I have been on the EB with that person. Awards have been given to certain women when they were not even performing in the committee. The most surprising part, I still remember this MUN, was when a lot of damage control had to be done because a position paper award was given to a girl because she was pretty by this very male member. And yet at the very next conference, he was chairing. So my only point is, which I would like to ask also to people who are organizing MUNs, is that keep the invite basis if you don't want to open it to applications, which is also flawed in a way. But even if you're inviting, why are these people still getting a chance to take part in a circuit which is supposed to be bringing about a change in the student mindset, student growth, student body as a whole? So this is a question. If anybody has anything like, why have they still been given a chance in the circuit to chair, to have that power dynamic after they have been accused of a crime, I would say.
So just to add to what Kaveri said, I have a feeling that both of us have been there in the same committee. I was, I think, a delegate, and Kaveri was on the executive board. This is years ago. And I think it's the same conference as she is referring to. I don't know if it's the same or not, but the thing is that, I want to give in a little solution sort of thing also. Another thing that a lot of conferences don't do is do a background check on your executive board if it is invite based. So recently, when I was chairing Stephens, they did a background check not only on people that I recommended, but also on me when I myself was invite based, and not just from one person, but also from the conference that you're being called to and the people that are working with you. That sort of ensures the quality of the person that you're calling. And even though it's a very tiny step, but I still don't understand, like Kaveri very rightly said, these I would like to call them out, these sexual harassers who've been roaming around very freely in the circuit even today, and all of us know them, are still those stalwarts of the conference or of MUNs in general. And I feel like their merit is not questioned because they're supposed to be, I don't know, gods of MUN, and that's how people actually do refer to them. Also, you will see on the MUN circuit Facebook page how they're referred to and how they're talked about and how people I don't know, look up to them. But I think this There needs to be a stop. I mean, calling out is done, but you can't go back to normalcy once you've called them out. You have to take steps. You have to stop calling them. That's one thing your equity committee or your selection committee must do.
I just want to add on to what Ananya just said. Last week, I was in an online conference. I don't want to start talking about online conferences, but I was in an online conference. And there was this one particular person from the Delhi circuit who was participating in a Bombay MUN. And this person, nobody knew him in the Bombay circuit. When me and a friend of mine, we got to know this person is in this conference, we complained to the I was on the executive board. This particular person was delegating. I went to the conference OC members. I was like, see, this is the issue. I think we should absolutely take him out. There is no way this particular person can participate considering that so many girls have complained about him. And the reaction which I received from the organizing committee is baffling, all right? They said he paid the delegate fee. There is no way they can throw him out of the committee right now. And that he's been performing extremely well. And that his male EB member is refusing to throw him out just because a few girls made allegations. All right, this is something which I heard from the organizing committee. And that was it, right? I completely got out of the conference. I completely understand I took up responsibility for my committee, but I think we ourselves should not be working with organizing committees or conferences which follow these kinds of rules and regulations and which do not really support women. I think it starts from us, that we start alienating such kind of conferences, that we stop going to such kind of conferences, even if it costs us money, reputation, even if they're your friends. I don't think we should be having friends like this to begin with. So I think the change comes from us within, us being executive board members, what kind of steps we take.
Yeah, Priyanshu, go ahead.
All right. So, hearing all of what has been said, first of all, answering the pertinent question as to why the people are still being called, right? So now answering from the organizer's point of view, which is not a place I would like to be in there, but like having been there, the thing is that all of these people that we have created as high personalities who come to conferences because, again, their face value breeds delegates is the term that we have all heard, right? So the thing is that we all know that they're called because their face gets conferences delegates. Fair. I mean, as an organizer, an interesting element is that by the time I started doing conferences, it was pretty late, but when I started doing MUNs in, say, 2014, I suppose, there were not many Model UN conferences happening. There were only credible, good conferences happening. Now we see 150 conference within Delhi in a month, especially online, happening. And that's where the problem is, because all of them have to get delegates. All of them have incompetent executive board members sitting because their face gets delegates. And I think that's where, the pertinent problem lies. Talking about tokenistic representation, again, from an OC member's point of view, let's also, I've been in places where I've heard that, say we have 5 committees, let's fill up 1 invites and opening applications and everything is good. So let's just talk about this. So the idea of opening applications becomes more and more important because you still call the people you want to call. I mean, once they qualify the application process, I mean, because there are other people who are applying. Also mentioning that it's important that I agree with the entire idea that's being talked about here, that there's certain kinds of committees that we feel that women do and certain kind of committees that men do. For example, let's talk about defense or military or committees like this. Especially I've been there crisis committees where so-called people, males from military background, can do it. But the idea that also needs to be changed is that you don't chair conferences just because you have an experience in chairing a particular kind of a committee. You do that because you have experience, I think, and I think it ought to be like this, that you chair that, you should chair that because you have significant amount of knowledge about the topics that are being discussed. So the idea there is for me, and I did not want to say this, but I do not identify myself as an MUNer, okay? And the idea is very simple, because been there since a long time, matlab, considerable amount of time, we've seen that there's certain amount of system which is not right, and making a change about it is good, but all we can do is try and make a change at our level. The idea is that you do conferences, at least I do conferences because I want to learn. I think I have significant amount of knowledge in the kind of committees that are chairing, not because I am a stalwart in doing UN women type of committees, or I'm a stalwart doing economic committees, for example. I mean, great, but you also have to bear in mind the responsibility you bear to the people that you're going to teach something, because these delegates, maybe a lot of them first timers, are coming to conferences to learn something. The idea of learning something and understanding that we are coming to a conference because it's a healthy competition, it is not something we have to show our egos of, is rare, because I think it's very rare when we do not understand that we're going to conferences because we like debating. We're not going to conferences again to use them as dating sites or to find people to date. And the entire idea, I've heard this happening, and let's extend this idea. So how schools generally fill delegations nowadays, because now they have to send a lot of people to a lot of hundreds of conferences that are happening. So say on an average, a school might be sending a delegation to 2-3 institutions or 2-3 conferences. Much of them might be private too, because in private you give this concept to people to who are not generally getting a chance because they're not maybe good enough or whatever, to chair in these private conferences. And that's why the school system works this way, that these people from these schools who are chairing private conferences gather delegations from their schools. I mean, being on the other side, the thing is that teachers also somehow fill delegations by saying that this happens prominently in the Delhi MUN circuit, and that's why I disassociate to as much as I can, because so the idea is you fill people by saying that अगर नहीं भी बोल के आओगे तो you go and आपको formals पहनने को मिलेंगे. I mean, these are the kind of things I've heard. That is a problematic notion. You are encouraging the wrong thing to the people of impressionable age. Also, when they go to these competitions, they see this kind of toxic thinking existing, I would say, which is not actually contributing anything to the learning. And this is where I close it. Thank you.
Yeah, Weber, before I move on to you, I just want to read out something that came in the live chat because it's pertinent to what Priyanshu said, and if anyone wants to take that up, you can add. So someone said, by rejecting the tag of a manner, I believe it's just an act of shrugging off responsibility. Manners, especially senior members and organizers, have the onus of the mess they have contributed to. And I think this comes as a rebuttal to what Priyanshu said about I don't like to associate myself as a manner because of the problems inherent in the community. So does someone want to comment on that? Okay, yeah, Weber, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tanishi. I think I'll answer to both of the questions which are raised in the chat box. But before that, I'll just get back to Kaveri's fundamental question of asking, why do we still see sexual harassers or predators doing MUNs, giving them access to a safe space like Model UN conferences? I think it also takes us back to a very, very fundamental debate which we saw happening during the Me Too movement. I remember sharing a lot of stories by my fellow colleagues, how they were harassed, how they were put in uncomfortable situation. But at that time also, we faced some very structural barriers, and this catch term was thrown around on Facebook like anything, which is called due diligence process. Like, let the law take its own course, let us follow due diligence, and if the perpetrator is perpetrator, the law will take its course on the perpetrator. I think at the very outset, all of us need to know and understand that law operates on very compartmentalized, boxed categories. And generally, these categories do not understand human realities. For an example, you have harassment laws, you have sexual harassment laws, which are gender specific, not to opine that women do not face the maximum brunt of sexual harassment or sexual abuse, but to have such specific categories just erases or accentuates the vulnerability of people who do not fall within those categories. So everyone out here, the problem lies in the fact that everyone thinks law is pristine and absolute. The moment we start questioning law, our country, our society as we think of it, disintegrates. This is the rationale which has been fed into our brain, that we have to stick to the law. And when we try to stick to the language of law, to the process of law, we just invisibilize the power dynamics which are embedded within it. I have seen prominent manners of my colleagues, the ones which I have delegated and chaired with. They have used the powers and provisions of law to silence women who face the double stigma. They face the stigma at home that why did you go to the MEN conference? Why did you go to extracurricular activity which put your body at risk, which put your consent at risk, your bodily integrity at risk? So this reverse questioning goes back, like a sort of victim blaming happens here without questioning the structures, the power embedded, like the unequal power which is embedded in Mendelian circuits. And that's very important thing to understand and grapple your head around. I think someone also asked a question about what about old male members chairing school committees? How does that function? Isn't it a scandal in itself? I think age, while it's ironic, of course, like I'm quite old here, like I'm 24, but the argument is that the logical or the rationale behind is that as you grow older, you accumulate experience and you're better at handling people or judging debates and so on. That's a very simplistic rationale which operates, which is quite untrue. I think we also need to think about moderating beyond judging whether your argument was correct or not. Moderating a committee, and I know all of you understand that moderating a committee takes a lot of emotional labor. How you handle and mold young minds is a very important responsibility which we completely overlook. It's all about whether you have knowledge or not. That defines your caliber as a EB. How you cater to the emotional needs, the learning needs of delegates is something which is again thought about as very emotional, very feminine, which is not worth our attention. And this is how dehumanization of such processes happen. And I think we get back to Priyanshu's point, how all of us have been turned into commodities. MUN is a business model. We are commodity. Vaibhav Das is a commodity. You put him out there or put them out there, and delegates come, crowds come in. So this business model itself has turned out to be toxic. And talking about the tag of Manner, while I acknowledge all the structural inequalities and the place of privilege we operate on, I cannot undo, or I can never take off the tag of Manner from myself, because I know I have played a very important part. And what makes me happy is that the generations which are coming after us, they are taking the onus and responsibility to call out what has been systematically and historically wrong with our activity. And there is no doubt the mess which my predecessors and my own batch have left the young generation, or the people who are coming now, who are running right now, we have left a big mess. But I think the positive outlook for the future is that now we are having conversations over it. We are acknowledging what are the points of subversions. How do people how do silencing happen? Because a lot of harassment never comes to forth. As Kaveri said, it was before Me Too have happened, it was a very common knowledge who were the abusive men who were getting EB positions. It was a common knowledge, and they used to be valorized as Casanovas, heroes, studs. We will go to their committee because there's this charm. But the moment Me Too happened, the negative light, the gaze turned away, and now we understand how these perpetrating behavior happened. And the moment you see a perpetrator in a EB position, you get motivated to be a harasser. It organically happens. You valorize their activities, how they flirting in committee or chair, coming with a very witty comeback for a female delegate, just sets an example how you can make you can easily make remarks or curt remarks at girls, and that becomes normalized. And I think we have a huge responsibility. I'm speaking for myself. I do not come from a holier thou. I don't wear a holy ring over my head. I have been in mud, and I know how toxic MUN activities can be. But the credit also goes here that now we are talking, we are acknowledging what have been the loopholes, and now we are talking about how we can make our activity better. We have become a butt of joke, but remember, there's always a bet. I have seen people prosper and take something more meaningful. Like myself, like I'm an example. Like my life was in a dismay, but the direction, like MEN gave me a purpose to like hone my own personality. So there are brighter sides, but I'm very happy that now the conversation, now the entire attitude towards sexual harassment and inequalities have changed. So I think that's how I would like to answer both the questions. It's not the age, but how pertinent, how consistent you are with understanding the crowd you are like chairing, be it college or school. There is a certain emotional labor and consideration, empathy. Basically, we all like in the process of valorizing logic, we have just forgotten that we are human beings who are also supposed to operate on empathy, right? And I think it's time that we get that back in, and logic can take a back seat for the time being. Yeah.
Can I quickly add on to what Vaibhav said? I'm really sorry, Kaveri. This is something which Kaveri herself pointed out about complaints even before Me Too, right? Let's talk about what happens to complaints, even if complaints are raised. Not a lot of women come upon on online social media and talk about their issues, especially related to MUNs, right? Let's think about complaints which are raised during the conference, when the conference is going on. Now, there are two aspects which we need to look at here. One, conferences which are organized by universities and and conferences which are private. There are a lot of private conferences coming up nowadays, right? Now, if you see university conferences, there is an ICC which is set up. If this particular student is not from this university, there is another set of rules and regulations which are put up by the college itself. The MUN is associated with the college, so the college needs to step in. It takes months or years together to actually give any justice to the victim in general. Okay. And if you see private conferences, which are on quite a rise right now, they do not have any policy to begin with. Where do the complaints go? What is going to happen when somebody does complain about this? Are you ready to remove the executive board member from the conference, or are you going to ask them to step down? There are a lot of questions which come up, right? So I think we should also start focusing our conversation towards what do we do in situations like this? How do we divide universities, and how do we divide these private conferences and come out with policies or redressal mechanisms as such, which will help complainees in general?
Before Kaveri, I'll give the floor to you next, but I just want to move the conversation ahead a little bit. I'm so happy with the way this conversation is going, but I think we'll run out of time soon, so I'm sorry, I just have to kind of move it ahead a little bit. So what I predominantly hear is an incredible lack of consequences, and therefore normalization and deeper entrenchment of these tendencies within the community. And now I just want the conversation to go towards, like, can we talk about why is there such a lack of consequences when there's clear open recognition of the crimes being committed, the biases, the sexism, and how do you fill that gap going forward?
One thing which I wanted to say was this is something I think we noticed back in the school circuit, that the people who were chairing school conferences initially, I would say back in 2012-13, they were mainly school kids. So I would say everybody had an equal chance to be on both sides of the table, whether it was chairing, whether it was delegating. Everybody had an equal chance to be able to experience whether they enjoy delegating more or whether they enjoy chairing more. And there was no question of the same people chairing again and again. My only part being, why can't we introduce that in colleges as well? Why can't we restrict the participation in MUNs to people who are still in an academic institution? Because that way MUNs will not function they'll function as an extracurricular activity, but not as a business avenue, what certain people have created it as. As much as I remember, when we started off, there was no concept of remuneration except for one or two MUNs in the country, I would say. We all chaired, we all used to pay for delegating because we wanted to be in that particular conference. We were not getting remunerated for chairing a conference either. This entire concept of giving large amounts as, the large amounts of money as compensation is what has also degraded the circuit to a limit and created it as a business model. Why not restrict the people who are actually chairing to them being a part of an academic institution, to restricting MENs to an extracurricular activity which it is supposed to be, to a learning avenue, instead of opening it up to people who are not students anymore. That is one thing which sort of made me also leave MENs, I'll be honest, because I had no plans to study further after my undergraduate degree. So in my final year, I decided that this is it. I want to leave the floor for people who are joining the circuit now. I don't want to be the person who will be chairing when other people are not getting the chance and I am the only one who's being called. So that sort of mindset needs to be inculcated, and that will not happen organically. That will have to be enforced. So that is one thing, since we have people who are organizing conferences present amongst us right now, and this is being streamed, why can't this be implemented as a measure is what I wanted to ask and suggest. Also, the question that you raised, that why is it happening and why are there no consequences to what people do? I have been a part of both the scenarios where an executive board member was sent home that night itself, and this was in KIIT MUN, that the person was accused of a certain thing that he did, and that night itself he was told that you are not required in the committee on the next day. So if that is how promptly action can be taken, then it will be a comfortable space for everybody. I've also been a part of the conference where even after complaints by 5 girls of the same committee, the executive board was called for, the member was called for the second edition as well. So it all depends on which side you want to be on. So yeah.
I want to add to Kaveri's point. Absolutely, there have been conferences which took immediate action. I think the problem here is that a lot of conferences, especially you see a lot of school kids also coming up and starting their own private conferences. You see a lot of people just starting off conferences, online conferences or offline conferences. They are not really aware of what to do. Right? That's where the problem lies. A lot of conferences are not really aware, okay, if a situation like this arises, what are the steps which I'm supposed to take? You see, especially in kids' conferences, especially when kids are organizing it, school children, and they call executive board members who are 10 years older to them, 15 years older to them, right? You see that they do not know how exactly to approach or talk to them about this. Okay, they put them on a pedestal. They think they're gods, that they cannot really talk to them or like approach them or bring out such kind of issues or even talk about complaints in general, because they are scared about what these holier than thou people are going to do to them, right? If they're going to do to them in the sense like, are they going to make derogatory comments on them, or are they going to take their reputation away? These are all the things which come up even for like school conferences, or what are the consequences of if I complain about this person is going to be. We need to start off by putting up conditions that when you are an executive board member, you are being employed by that particular conference. You are not the one holding the say out here, that you are an employee and the Secretary General or whoever there is, you are answerable to them. All right. When they ask you for a mark sheet, you have to give them a mark sheet. You cannot just say, I've done 100 conferences, I'm not really answerable to anyone. How dare you question me on my knowledge? Now this is something which needs to come up. Again, this might probably go in terms of, when I say like you are an employee, it might probably look like a business model, but I think what is important to understand here is that there are certain responsibilities given to you as an executive board member, and no matter how many MUNs you have done, no matter how much knowledge you have to abide by these rules and regulations.
Yeah, Vaibhav, go ahead.
I think I'll just get back to your question, which is like why this condition still is very prevalent across model UN circuits. I think we also need to look at the idea of harassment or sexual abuse in general. How do we imagine it? Um, when we were working, I was working with Sai Shri on the Equity Forum. The larger idea which we got is that there is a structural problem here. No one wants to address sexual harassment, everyone wants to avoid and hide it. For an example, a woman subjected to sexual harassment or sexual abuse, a trans person or a queer person subjected to sexual harassment or abuse is like a poisonous knowledge which you cannot expose the community to. Sexual harassment, abuse happening at MUNs is like antithetical. You have human rights committee at one place going on, and in the night you get a harassment complaint. That's like ironic. So it happens at all levels: organization level, the institution, host institution level, and within the delegates and executive board members. No one wants to be in a situation where they want to talk about sexual harassment within a MUN, because that becomes a poisonous knowledge. Like, no, that's an exposure. No one wants to like deal with harassment, because the moment you start dealing with harassment, a entire worm can opens, and then you need to like reflect how you also have been a part in nurturing a culture where women, trans folks, queer folks have been relentlessly silenced and excluded from conferences. So what I think I will build upon what Anya said before leaving is that the approach to change the status quo as we know of it is three folds. One is the pre-conference. Like before the conference happens, it's so important to have a very robust system of background check, because the problem also originated from how we have networking, word of mouth, recommendation, invite. To counter that toxic mechanism, and I'm not saying that I have not been a product of it. I have good ties with a lot of people, and I have like gained from like invites, and I'm not saying from a tone that I am a very pristine person, holier than thou person. I'm saying to counter that invite based vulnerability where you might have invited a harasser to your conference, you need to have a robust background check. And that can be in multitude ways. You can ask their previous working colleagues, their delegates, the conference which they attended to, because the organizer, the person who is judging with them, and the person who has been judged by them, all the three of them will give you a different perspective over the person's virtue and vices both. The second, during what Sai Shri is another important point, during the conference, I think here the responsibility of the organizing committee comes in, because I'm not talking from a blank point of view. I also know how the organizing committee is also juggling between being answerable to the host institute, which is like a replica of a family or a nation which doesn't want to hear anything bad which has happened in the conference, because that ensures that the next edition happens or not. They're juggling with the institute, they're also juggling with the complaints by the delegate. So I think it here becomes your moral responsibility, your values come in question, whether you want another edition at the cost of silencing a person. If that is so, your next edition just loses its meaning, because you have lost your value in the process of producing another conference. And that is something which doesn't settle or board with me well. So during conferences, I think it needs to be a very robust mechanism to like undertake complaints, to like handle them with utmost sensitivity and impartiality, because in most of the cases, the organizers are also BFFs or the best friends of the executive board members who have come in. There is this kinship, there is this relation. And that's why you need to have an equity board which is impartial and thorough in its investigation, so that some speck of justice is expected from this body. And post-conference, I think it's very important to mediate a harassment case or a sexism case post-conference, because out here, the identity of the survivor, the identity of the perpetrator becomes very critical, and it also needs to be negotiated with utmost sensitivity. And I think, of course, these are big says. These seem very easy statements when I speak of it, but it's like very complex situations, because me and Sai Shri, I believe after 4 months of drafting that document midway, like we had to like just break because we are not going anywhere forward. So it's a very complicated process. And the only fact that I'm ratting all of this out to all of you right now is, please take from us whatever we have endured, both good and bad, build upon it, and say that at least you were not like us, or you were not silent like us when abuses were happening. Not going to say that we were silent, but I'm collectively talking about my generation or the generations above us. And I think that is where we can like leave this question at.
Uh, yeah, Sashi, I'll open the floor to you, and after that, I'll invite closing statements from everyone because I think we're running a little bit short on time. But yeah, Sashi, go ahead.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with what Vaibhav just pointed out. Another very important question which should come up at this point is, as Vaibhav has spoken about the equity board in general, who do we select to be part of this equity board? That's a very important question we need to address, because I have seen multiple circuits coming up with different redressal mechanisms, different documents, where sometimes perpetrators themselves have been actively involved in making equity documents. All right. Now, this is the biggest question. Are we going to involve these perpetrators to be part of the equity board, or friends of perpetrators to be part of this equity board? That is not going to take us anywhere. So one of the very important things which we need to do here is selection. How the scrutiny is going to be. And another very important point, as Tanishi here, who is our moderator, she clearly pointed out that she does not do MUNs. And I think that is also very important. We need to have on board people who are not directly involved in Model United Nations, people who have gender sensitization studies done, who have been actively involved in making policies with respect to sexual harassment. So these are the people who we need to involve in our conferences to make this equity board stronger. And we need to ensure that starting from, so when you start working on your conference, probably 6 months before or a year before, that's when you start working on your equity board as well. You need to definitively have a board which is strong. At the same time, do not really involve perpetrators, friends of perpetrators, or people who you think are going to be involved in the crime and will keep justice, keep reaching justice justice to our to the victims or anyone who is our complaining. Thank you.
Thank you, Sashi. So yeah, we'll move on to closing statements. This has been incredible, but unfortunately, it needs to come to an end. So, Jyotika, do you want to start us off?
Yeah. So I feel that the conversations about sexism today need to go beyond just MUMs. There are no consequences in conferences because the precedent that is set by the actual law of the country, by the authoritarian figures outside, are just not as great. Thank you so much for having me here. This was a great discussion to be a part of. Thank you.
Thank you. Kaveri?
Firstly, I'd like to thank thank the Equinox MUN Society for holding a conversation on a topic which has been shunned off for quite a long time. Secondly, I would like to end up by reiterating the solutions which were brought up in the course of our discussion. The first one being that the culture of invites, which we all have been a part of, needs to sort of start disintegrating now. Applications which used to exist before need to come back so that people who are not so outspoken, not so well known, but have been in the circuit also get a chance to chair. Secondly, I would like to stick to my point about the age factor being taken into consideration, that school conferences being restricted to school students so that they have a platform to hone their skills, as well as college and university conferences being restricted to people who are still in an academic institution to sort of stop the entire commercialization of conferences. And the last part being, as Vaibhav had pointed out in the beginning of the discussion, about certain traits being associated to be feminine, certain traits being associated with masculinity, with respect to logic, rationality, authority. So conversations about these, change about these need to happen at the ground level itself. When you're calling people to chair, when you're selecting delegates, even if you have a large number delegates applying for a committee start the change there itself. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kaveri. Saishri?
All right. I think this has been a great conversation, something which I was absolutely looking forward to. And I ranted quite a lot of things which has happened to me in the past in MUNs. And this has been absolutely amazing. With that, I just want to conclude saying that there is an absolute necessity of an equity board or a redressal committee for conferences, not just university MUNs, but private conferences as well. It is very important that conferences take this extra time off and try to make not just the conference in general, but also the accommodation which they are providing to delegates in general safe. All right, and this will take extra work. And when we are organizing MUNs, I think it is very important that we do take that extra time of money, effort, whatever it takes to ensure that your conference is safe for your delegates and your executive board members, and obviously your secretariat and OC members as well. Very important point again, the last one I want to conclude, proper interviews and background checks. I think this is the first place to start with, that you do an interview, do not start just inviting people just because they're famous or just because you feel they're going to attract delegates. I think MUN is an academic learning simulation, right? So I think we need to ensure that we take people who are knowledgeable up on board. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I'll again go at the end. First of all, thank you, Equinox, for this opportunity, and Tanishi for a brilliant moderation. Before I move on to the 4 points which I want to make, I would like to address Saishri and Kaveri. I have worked with them in past. I have seen them at conferences, and it's so important to have them around conversations pertaining to women issues, because from my personal experience, I've seen it's very uncomfortable to stand next to them, not in a negative sense, because they will not take anything at its face value. As in, you cannot just like put anything to them and they will humbly accept it. They're out there, they question everything, and you cannot wrong them. Like, they are strong actors. And I will tell you why I'm addressing this quality in both of them, because I'll tie it up with my last point, which I have to make. I think the first point which I would like to make here is, I think we all should start having these uncomfortable conversations, be it with your institution, be it with your fellow organizers, be it with your EB members, because at EB briefing also, it's such a mechanical operation. You hesitate to say that if you make any untoward behavior, or you have allegations, or you make an error, not an error, if you commit a harassment, you will be booted out. And this conversation also is laced with power. You feel very awkward telling this to your EB. I think here we need to start having this awkward conversation. Second, understand how passive and active sexism happens. Sexism is just not related to harassment and abuse. Sexism is normal conversation. It's normal gestures, how you choose to sit, how you choose to moral police. Remember, moral policing also does not happen at the pretext of protecting women's body. You are questioned for wearing a short skirt, not because with respect to the sanctity or integrity of your body, but you are distracting men who are present in the committee. So the focus is always male centric. The focus, our approach is always what the male desires or what the male will prefer. And I think this is how we need to understand how passive and active sexism happens. And secondly, what I think this is something which I've held very dear to me. I have a history where I've been subjected to bullying, because I have been called my audio and visual does not match, because I have a very a feminine voice, or not a coarse husky voice, which is generally attributed to a man. I think it is very important to not undervalue your bodily integrity and mind, because they can take anything away from you, but they cannot take your bodily integrity and the spirit of your mind, and you have to hold it together even when everything is posed against you, structures, people, power, whatsoever. And the last point which I come to you, operate and share empathy. Empathy lacks, like a lack of empathy plagues our circuit. And that's why we give this absoluteness, some finality to law, invalidating human experiences. We do not want to hear a woman narrating her experience of sexual harassment, because we will cite some random false allegation by a random person in some random locality, as if that becomes a benchmark to just silence all the allegations which will come forward in future. So my last point is like, and this is something Kaveri and Saishri have done very efficiently. They have spoken their mind. They have not taken things easily, and they have been in a questioning position, and they have faced a lot of problem. I hear things, all of us hear things about what has happened, what doesn't happen. And these are things which you learn. Okay, this is a person of integrity. This is a person who knows their worth. And this is very important as an individual to know, be it a man or a woman or a trans person or a queer person. You need to hold your bodily integrity and your mind absolutely, because no one else will do that. And with that point, I think we need to depart from giving some absolute pristine position to law, and we need to start giving that absolute treatment to human beings, because at the end of the day, we are not dealing with law, we are dealing with humans amongst us. And I think on that note, I'll just wrap up my concluding statements. Thank you.
Thank you, Vaibhav. I think that wraps things up for us. I would once again just like to thank everyone, all the panelists for being here, and the team at Equinox World MUN for letting me do this. As a non-mana, I think this, even without having been a part of the community, this one conversation, I won't claim to obviously understand the issue in its entirety. I understand that there's so many layers to this. It's extremely complex. I won't claim to have gotten an entire grasp on the problem, but I think I understand just from this one conversation what a lot of the problems are and how simple so many of the solutions are. So, and I hope everyone that can make a difference will take it upon themselves to contribute to make this community more inclusive, safer, fair. And yeah, thank you for having me.
So I'd like to thank all of you. Like, we have had these awkward conversations one to one, or this at the conferences in a group of five. I was glad that all of you were able to come together at this platform. It was really haunting that even experiences which like some of you have been emulating for now like a long time, and though even I have not been someone who has done this activity that much, but I was able to like feel it's pretty normal that okay, yeah, this has happened in front of me. And again, the point of Me Too, like we had such a big Me Too movement, at the end, like still those people are cheering. And I can say one thing, like what the motto of this webinar was also that we can't promise change, but like through this webinar, let's initiate change. And I can vouch that moving ahead, I'll obviously try to take all the points, and I wish that all the people who have been associated here, and because like we our colleagues all will be amazing, many of us. So I guess everyone starts initiating change. I guess this educational activity maintains its sanctity, and that we end up in a safer space back again. Better debating and better ambiting. Thank you everyone for joining in. It was great having all of you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Shashwat?